it up nicely. So, any questions? Great, down the vote. Thank you, and I appreciate that this is kind of a weird subject for Kiwis because it's a very unique field, and so I'm going to be talking about something that's very new to almost everybody, and so I try to present very technical material in a way that's easy to follow. Not that I'm talking down to you, but I try to tell a story about what's behind the technology. And the presentation is pitched to young explorers. You know, I mentor a lot of students, a lot of emerging explorers, and that's what the presentation is pitched to. But I try and throw something in for everyone. And when I look around the room here, there is everyone here. There's people from my Lincoln class, and people from my doc career, and of course, friends and family. So without further ado, let's talk about exploring the unknown, lessons from the Hadal Zone. And I apologise in advance that the system has chewed up all of the formatting. So I wanted to talk about exploration just for a minute because I'm often introduced as an explorer, and I always think that when you're introduced as an explorer, I expect someone taller. The thing is that we all start as explorers, right? When we're little kids, we're running around scoffing up things that we find, putting them in our mouths to see what they taste like, what the texture is. We're always running to the end of the garden or the water's edge or somewhere until our parent or caregiver says, come back, come back. And so that's how we get to know our world. We explore it. And then as we get older, the risk factor and the worry of parents and the restrictions on us force us to sort of lose that sense of exploration and start acting like proper grown-ups. I've never had that problem. Exploration to me is curiosity that is acted upon. If you're curious about something and you follow it, you're exploring. It doesn't matter if you're looking over the next hill or going left when you've always taken a right or trying the thing on the menu you've never had before. That's exploration. And then the other word that's new to you today is Hadal. Hadal comes from the Greek word Hades, and it refers to that ocean, that part of the ocean that's below 6,000 meters. The ocean bottoms out at 10,926 meters. So it's the deepest part of the ocean, but it forms about 45% of the ocean by volume. If you were from another planet coming towards Earth, and you were coming on this trajectory, you'd wonder, why did those Wallies call it planet Earth? Clearly it looks like planet Ocean. 71% of our planet's surface is covered in seawater. And when you see this view, which is, for most audiences I'm presenting to, this is a very foreign view to them. Of course, you're New Zealanders from the South Pacific, so this is your home turf. But when you see that shot, it shows you how much ocean is out there. Back in 2018, this guy, a guy from Texas, Victor Vescovo, came to me and he said, you know, I know you helped Jim Cameron get to the Mariana Trench back in 2012. I'd like to do the same thing, but I'd like to do it multiple times, and I want to have a different kind of submersible. So then we got chatting, and that's when he worked out that actually no one has been to the deepest point of the other 4 oceans. And only 2 craft have ever got to the bottom of Challenger Deep. Trieste in 1960 was down for about 20 minutes on the bottom, and Deep Challenger in 2012 with Jim Cameron was down for about 2.5 hours. Victor could not get his head around the fact that we had this massive volume of seawater that no one had explored. Not only had no one ever been to the deepest point of all of the 5 trenches, or 5 deepest points, no one even knew where they were. So an adventure was born, and although we've done about 1,500 expeditions, I picked this one because it's my favorite, and I get to choose. So this was described by the guy who did the Challenger Deep first in 1960 as the most ambitious exploration expedition of the century, because it had never been done before. We figured that if we were going to go to the bottom of each of the 5 oceans, we would need a pretty good submersible. And so in standing back with a sketch pad and a glass of wine, we thought, right, what are the sort of elements that we need to put into into a sub. First is we need a pilot, and then we thought, we're going to do science, so we're going to need a scientist or a filmmaker or a storyteller, someone else to share the ride. We're going to be going down for 12 hours, so we need a lot of life support. We need people to be comfortable. We need to add oxygen in, and we need to remove CO2, carbon dioxide. We need an emergency life support system because this is a classed vehicle. That means that it's certified by an independent agency. And if you have a classed vehicle, then you've got to have 96 hours of life support. We're going to need to put this in a pressure vessel. And because we're going so deep, we need a really thick pressure vessel. So we selected titanium as our material of choice. Very difficult to work with, but incredibly strong for its weight. 90 millimeters thick. Pressure is hard for humans to understand, unless you're standing up here trying to get a thing to work at the deadline. But pressure is hard for humans to visualize because we can't see it. So what I do with school kids is I say to them, look, if you take a Boeing 747, a jumbo jet, and you load it up full of bags, people, and fuel, at its maximum, it can weigh 400 tons. So we're going to put that 400 tons, we're going to stack it up on top of this hull. That's what it's like at the surface. Every minute on the dive down to Challenger Deep, we add another 747. We do that for 240 minutes. That's how long it takes to dive to the bottom. So this craft has got to sustain the weight of 240 fully laden 747s. It's 100,000 tons pressing down on this titanium sphere. We're going to need a hatch so we can get in and out, and we're going to need some way of connecting the two hulls because they're actually built as hemispheres that are put together. We can't weld them together because the stress would create a crack. So we actually have them just resting together, and then we have a couple of clips around like a gentleman's cummerbund that just hold everything in place until we get down 10 meters, and then the pressure squeezes them together. The deeper we go, the tighter it gets. We wanted 3 viewports, one for each person and one to look down on the seafloor. And then we start adding in all the accoutrements, cameras, lights, sonar, altimeter, a frame to put it on, a lifting frame so that we can pick it up out of the water. And then we want this to be super maneuverable on the bottom. We want it to be like an underwater helicopter. So we put 10 thrusters on it, 10 propellers on it. They're powered by batteries. We have 6 very heavy batteries. And then because we've got all that weight, we need to start adding some foam. We need to start adding some lift. And the foam that we use is called syntactic foam. It's microscopic glass beads that are in a very heavy resin. So if you picked it up, it would feel like a brick. It's very heavy, but miraculously it floats because of all these tiny glass beads. So it's a material that can't be compressed, but does offer flotation even if you're down at 11,000 meters. So we need foam. We need a lot of foam. In fact, most of the sub is actually made of foam. And we put a manipulator arm so that we can reach for things. And then here's a view from underneath. We start adding weight because this is a positively buoyant sub. It wants to come to the surface. We have to force it to go down. And we do that by putting on 2 groups of weight. We put on a surfacing weight, and then we put on a freeboard weight. And we can release those. In fact, if anything happens, they release automatically. They are only held in place by electromagnets. If there's a power cut, then they release. If the pilot doesn't hit a switch every 90 seconds, they release. If the surface is not happy with the way the dive is going, they can acoustically release. So the sub is designed to come home no matter what. We also have these teeny tiny little weights which are about the size of a big beer can. They weigh about 5 kilos each, and we have 2 tubes of them running up inside the sub. And we can release those one at a time, and that just helps us very fine-tune our buoyancy when we're at the very bottom of the ocean. Then we put on the modem so that we can communicate, put on a pretty little face there. The reason we put that is not just to make her better looking, but it's also, we've designed it in the shape of an axe head, because this sub is spending most of its dive going down through the water column or back up again. A dive at Mariana Trench means it's 4-hour commute each way, and so you want this streamlined shape to make that journey as easy as possible. Right, back to the top of the sub, we're going to put on these 2 ballast tanks. These are tanks which we fill with seawater when we're on the surface to help the sub sink. And when the sub comes back up again, we pump the seawater out and fill them full of air. Now we've got to get everybody in and out of the sub, so we put in a thing called a trunking, which is basically a vertical shaft, and then some gizmos so that we can find the sub when it's on the surface, some strobe lights and satellite beacons and that sort of thing. And then we have to have it so that it's designed to always come home. The 2 biggest fears in a sub are fire inside the capsule or entanglement. Entanglement in old fishing line, fishing nets. And this sub is designed to be at the bottom of the ocean. So if you've ever swum in a public pool, you'll know that all the band-aids end up in the deepest part of the pool. And the ocean's the same. You know, when we came back from Challenger Deep and said we'd found plastic bags down there, people were amazed. It's like, why are you amazed? They weren't going to go to space. They're always going to find their way down to the deepest point, to the sump. And so because this sub is swimming down on the bottom of the ocean, we're concerned about entanglement. And so we have a way of countering that by being able to jettison the weights, by being able to jettison the manipulator, by being able to drop off the battery pods, and also the thrusters, which are in 2 nodes of 5 thrusters each. And if we release all of that stuff, the sub has no choice but to come back to the surface. It would be a very uncomfortable ride, and it would actually break surface at the top, but there's no way anything would be able to hold you down. And then we have a cradle to put it on deck, and we end up with something which I think resembles pretty closely the original sketch we did back when we had that sketch pad and a glass of wine. This was described as the most significant exploration vehicle since Apollo 11, because we're going to explore inner space, the last part of our planet, the last frontier of exploration on Earth. We found a ship to put it on. We wanted a ship that was super quiet. This ship was designed by the Americans as I think the polite term is an intelligence gathering vessel, a dirty little spy ship. It used to tow a long acoustic array up the back, listening for Soviet submarines. When they were building these things, the government said to the shipyard, here's the specifications for noise that you have to build it to. And then just before delivery, they said to them, we'll give you another $1 million for every decibel you drop off. And so this is probably the quietest vessel that's ever been built. And that was perfect for us because we're wanting to send voice and data signals 7 miles down below us. So we wanted a quiet boat. We had a full ocean depth sonar, which allowed us to map the seafloor before we went diving. We put on a wet lab, a dry lab, 3 Hadal landers. The landers are like an autonomous vehicle, which I'll come back to in a minute, and 3 support craft for tending the sub when it was on the surface. I was asked by a journalist before we left Florida, you've got a prototype submersible, a refitted ship, a prototype sonar, a team that's never worked together on a mission that's never been attempted. What do you think could possibly go wrong? Well, as it transpired, bloody near everything. This is us on sea trials, which were supposed to take about 2 to 4 weeks and ended up taking nearly 6 months. And the reason for that is that sea trials are normally about testing new equipment. They're about testing a ship or a submarine. But in this case, we were testing the ship, and not just the submarine, but every single component that had gone into making the submarine. We were testing systems and processes and ways of doing things that had never been done before. Because there's no playbook, because there's no recipe, you're having to do this for the first time every time, and always at the risk of the occupants of the sub. So it was a very, very tough experience. I used to say to the team that if we're going to be successful, we are going to have to go through 1,000 failures. Let's try to space them out a bit. And the 1,000 wasn't a random figure. We figured that we had 100,000 components in the sub and the ship and the sonar and the landers. So if we have a 1% failure rate, which is pretty good, we're going to have to work through 1,000 failures before we get to the success line. So we turned failure into our sort of icon, if you like. A happy day was when we had more failures. They were only truly failures if they happened twice. None of them ever did. If we had a failure, we would learn from it, we would rewrite that part of the program, and then we'd go out there and do it again. You got major points for owning a failure and presenting it to the group. You got major points if you could help another person solve a failure point. And so failure became the way we operated. We just accepted that that was the way it was going to have to be. Here we are analysing something pretty simple. The lander was being launched. It launched early, and you can see it made a huge kaboosh on the side there. We're all watching the video to see exactly why it had failed. It's a simple fix, never happened again. This is a more serious failure. This is us looking for the sub that had reported a smoke in the cabin at 5,000 meters. Very, very serious problem, potentially catastrophic. We thought for a few minutes there that we might have lost the sub. And you can see that Ollie and I are looking fairly concerned. And so I don't want to paint this out as being cavalier. You know, our attitude was that we're going to manage the risks that we can. We're going to be aware of the risks that we can't. And the risks that we can't, we're going to plan carefully so that we've got fallback positions. So we can't stop smoke in the cabin, but if we detect smoke in the cabin, what happens next? And we have a playbook for that and a fallback playbook for that, so that there's always a plan A, B, C, D. Again, we're planning for success, but accepting that failure is the way to go. Here's a simple failure. This one is a circuit board in the sub. We don't have fires in the sub because this stuff is under so much pressure. They're called thermal events because you never actually see flame. You just get something that gets so hot that it melts down. But when you look at that circuit board and you think about every single thing on that board has had to be pressure tested to 14,000 meters, because our class society says if you want to go to 11, you have to test at 14, so there's a safety factor. Even though everything had been tested to way more than the depth we were using it at, we still had these failures, and that's simply because we were working our way through new technology. And it took us a long time to crack this code. Here's our electrical engineer. Not only is he installing new circuit boards, he's analysing what went wrong, and often he's just looking at a charred lump to make sure that when we order the next round, we've made the modification so the mistake doesn't happen again. So this, you know, I was always the good news bunny. My line was always rejoice, because if it fails now, it's not going to fail in the Southern Ocean, and if it fails down there, then I think I put in my deed because we're talking to polite people, but we'll be in big trouble. I love this photo because it shows some of the really key players. You know, in this photograph, the guy with his hand up is the good guy that's talking is the manufacturer of the submersible. But you can also see hiding in the corner in the blue is the class surveyor. He's the engineer that's responsible as the independent party to sign off the sub as being safe. Everybody else in the room has got a key part to play. They're the head of mechanical engineering, the head of electrical engineering, the head of the submersible operations, the owner is the guy in the blonde hair, and our safety auditor is off to one side. But you can see that even after a terrible day, there's no finger pointing, there's no blame shifting, there's no patch protection. People are completely open and honest about what failed, what went wrong, what we have to change. And that was an incredibly good way of operating. On the good news side of the ledger, our prototype sonar, which we used to map the seafloor before we went diving, was operated by a 23-year-old lady that I snatched out of a graduation ceremony in Seattle. And she was just fantastic, and she's the first person to map at full ocean depth, and she did it for almost 3 years. she was able to produce these maps. This is a map of Challenger Deep, the deepest point in the world's ocean. Every line you can see on there is a 10-metre contour, and she's actually put the yellow dots where she wants the sub to land and where she wants the landers to be. And so she's able to produce these beautiful 3D maps of a part of our planet that no one's ever seen before, certainly no one had ever mapped before. And as a result of that, we knew exactly how to plan our dive. So we used these maps to talk about where the sub was going to go and what we were going to achieve on the way. I mentioned the landers before. The landers are about the size of a large commercial refrigerator. They weigh a ton. They're basically 2 rows of syntactic foam, which is used to buoy up 3 very heavy-duty batteries. And they serve a number of functions. One is they act as a communication hub on the sea floor between the ship and the sub, or between the sub and other landers. We can use these as navigation aids, we can use them as radio beacons, but they also are equipped with lights and cameras and some baited fish, so that any animal swimming past would smell the bait and come in and be filmed. The sub is great for filming things that can't run away, but a lander is good for filming things that can run away but choose to come in for the bait. So if you have a sub and landers together, you capture almost everything. And as we got more and more into our diving, we learned how to operate the sub in heavier conditions. We learned to operate at night, and of course when you're diving to full ocean depth, you're always going to be recovering in the darkness because the dives are so long. And then we got to the point where we could operate in heavy weather at night, and that's when we knew that we were starting to get it dialed in. On the eve of our first first deep, if you like, which was the deepest point of the Atlantic Ocean, a place called the Puerto Rico Trench, the captain in the ginger hair came in to say, the weather's not looking great. Victor, the owner of the sub, was saying, I'm kind of out of money, and this has been 6 months of hell. It's been fun, but not real fun. And so the decision was made that the next day was a do or die effort. So we planned the dive, and everybody was very uptight about this dive, but the day dived perfectly. The sub went in the water in near perfect conditions, and here we are. This is Patrick listening to the voice box, talking to the sub, which is about 8,000 meters below us. And this is the first time anybody had ever talked to a vehicle that was that deep. And we're straining to hear what he's saying, and then he says he's on bottom. And you can see the release of energy in that photograph. People are just overwhelmed. I'm patting Patrick on the back, not as a good job, but just to say breathe, for God's sake, take a breath, because he was so pent up. But once we'd achieved that first deep, 8,500 meters, we knew that we were going to go around the world. We recovered the sub in beautiful conditions. It was a perfect evening. Patrick got on the phone to tell his wife that the sub had come back safely. You can see how exhausted he looks. He's only 27 in that photograph. Absolutely exhausted. Some alcohol was consumed, some songs were sung, but we knew that we were going to head off around the world and do the full circumnavigation. Cassie, our oceanographer, said the first time she saw us in operation, it was like an ocean rescue, and now it's like a graceful ballet. And it just took 6 months to get it all dialed in. So back to the drawing board, it was time to put our major plan into effect. We were starting off in the Atlantic Ocean, that was the Puerto Rico Trench, and then down into the Southern Ocean, just off the coast of the Antarctic, to do the deepest point in the Southern Ocean, and then across to dive Java Deep, Java Trench. We thought this might have been a deeper place, so we had to check that out on the way. And then across to Challenger Deep, and then a little visit to the Tonga Trench, because this is actually the second deepest trench in the world. And then on around through the Panama Canal, dive the Titanic on our way up to the Arctic Ocean, which was our 5th deep. So we were off to the races now. We were having a great time, and we got to the point where certainly the team was very, very comfortable, and then we had to flip everything around. Instead of encouraging everybody I used to list our biggest risk was complacency, because people were becoming really comfortable. And you don't want people becoming too comfortable, because then they lose the edge. You can't ever forget that you have two humans 7 miles below the keel, and a lot of things can go wrong. We're always operating on our own. Because we're operating in Hadal trenches, we're always a long way offshore, we're always miles off shipping routes. We never ever saw another vessel. In a whole year, we never saw another ship. So we got to become a very tight community of people operating alone together out in the middle of the big blue. Some of the strongest friendships I think that I'll have for the rest of my life. We became used to setting world records. Almost every dive we did would produce something new to science. It would certainly produce a world record of some kind. In this case, it was a world record depth. Officially, we say that we went to 10,925 meters. We actually went deeper than that. But if you go too deep, then people start arguing about the figure. So we just brought it up 10 meters and called it good. This is actually a little polished styrofoam coffee cup. I have a friend who had a friend who's got a child with leukemia, and he said, "Can you do a cup for Felix?" And I knew Felix wouldn't understand, so I did 2 cups, and one went down inside the sub and one went down outside the sub, and that shows you how the compression of 1100 atmospheres will squeeze that air out of that cup and make it into a little miniature. This is John Walsh on the left. He was the first guy to dive the Mariana Trench in 1960, congratulating Victor Vescovo, the first guy to do multiple dives to Challenger Deep. And you can see in that photograph, you can see an imaginary baton being handed from one generation to the next. Don was always our strongest supporter, because he waited his whole life to see his feat replicated. And now we were doing it almost daily. And he used to refer to it as the daily flight to the moon. That's how the technology had changed. We took the first woman to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. This is Kathy Sullivan. I had the pleasure of the responsibility, I guess, of choosing the right person. And she's a 3-time astronaut. She had been the head of NOAA, which is like the head of our NIWA. And she's just a super, super smart person, both on the ocean and in space. And so she's used the opportunity to great effect. She does a lot of presentations. We also had a couple of unexpected wins. And this one is a lander that's actually stuck on the bottom. At the very bottom of the Mariana Trench, the silt is quite fine, quite sticky. And the lander had got his feet stuck in the mud. And so someone needed to go down and give him a little bit of a shove and a wriggle to break that suction and let it back up to the surface. And the reason this is an important milestone is that up until that moment, anything below 6,000 meters in the ocean was gone forever. Now we have the ability to go to any depth in any ocean and manipulate something and bring it back to the surface. So when you think about all the things that people put below 6,000 meters because they didn't want the other side to get them, suddenly we became a major military strategy piece. And so people started to take a lot more attention in what we were doing. We got into the science buzz. People were so excited about the critters that we would capture and bring back, almost all of them new to science. That's my adult male hand on the left there. You can see that for scale. Some of these creatures are quite big. Lots and lots of cool animals that have not ever been seen by the human eye before. And then after a year and a bit of operations, we finally ended up in the Arctic Ocean, and in very cold conditions, very rough conditions, about -20 Celsius in the shot. We actually finally completed the 5 deeps. I'm always the last person back on the boat. And so I walked on, and Victor had already had a shower and got changed. He got out of the sun, had a shower, got changed, and come back in. He was waiting for me. And he'd asked me in our first meeting in Dallas, he said, "How will I know when I've been successful?" And I said, "You'll have achieved every one of our mission objectives. and we'll be the best of friends. And he's in that shot, he's saying, and we're still friends. You know, despite everything that had happened, we've kept in touch, and I'm actually working on his next project now. So in terms of, the numbers, we did 600 land deployments, we went to 30 different locations, we collected 4,000 hours of HD video. The reason that's important is that time goes so fast when you're in the sub. Most creatures are discovered by analysing video, and now we can do that with AI, so it's a much faster process. We've discovered over 100 species so far, but we collected 250,000 samples, so there will be tens of thousands of species that will be pulled out of the data that we collected. We collected over 3.5 million meters of CTD data. CTD is basically salinity, temperature, and depth. We've done that every meter for every dive that every nader has ever done. And we've collected bottom water from every deep, which is really important if you're trying to map how the oceans interact with each other. So lots of first dives to the Atlantic, Southern Indian and Arctic Oceans. Of course, people have been to the Challenger Deep in the Pacific before, but only ever once for 20 minutes and once for 2.5 hours. We've seen people down for as long as they wanted to stay down. First dive to Horizon, Jarvis, Sereno and Emblem Deeps, which are the 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th deepest parts of the world's ocean. And then the deepest salvage operation in history. The first submarine to dive multiple times to full ocean depth. And the first time that we actually, anyone's ever collected rocks from the bottom of the Mariana Trench. True confession, the first one was completely by accident. The sub landed so heavily that a rock got lodged in underneath it. And the lady from the University of Hawaii grabbed it. She said, "Can I have this?" I was like, "Sure," little rock. And they took it back to the university and they sliced it in half and had a look at it. Guess what was inside this rock? Bacterial matting. So from inside a rock, at the deepest point of the world's ocean, there was life. So life always finds a way. We carried on for another 2 years. We did 2 more long expeditions after that. I won't go into them at all, except to say that we then jumped over into archaeology. We found the world's deepest shipwreck, and then a month later found an even deeper one. And this is really just portraying that this remarkable vehicle can go to any depth in any ocean, so nowhere is out of bounds anymore. And of course, the Kiwi got to go for a ride, which for me was a culmination of a dream. On Anzac Day 3 years ago, got to go to the Challenger Deep, and we were fortunate because we had quite a specific mission, but we got through it quite quickly, so then we could go free ranging. And we discovered 2 of the holy grails. One was sulfur mounds. Scientists had always wanted to know, is there sulfur mounds at full ocean depth? And the reason that's important is because sulfur mounds is a source of energy. If you have energy at depth, then you can have an ecosystem. And then the second holy grail is bacterial matting, or what my son calls snot carpets. But snot carpets, bacterial matting, is the simplest form of life. And if you can find that at the bottom of the Challenger Deep, then that's a very important part of our understanding of evolution. It's also what Percy's looking for up on Mars. So there's kind of a symmetry there, that we're down here doing this and Percy's up there doing the same thing. The lessons. Make failure your friend. When I'm talking to young folks, almost everyone's younger than me now, but when I'm talking to younger folks, I live in the United States, and when a school kid goes in a race in the United States, everyone comes home with a gold star. Everyone comes home with a medal. There's no second or third place. Everyone gets a good for you, you tried hard. But I think that what happens over time is that it bleeds resilience out of people. People don't understand that it's okay to come second. It's okay to come last. It just means that maybe this is not your thing. We need to practice in a different way. But it doesn't give you resilience to failure. And as you know now as grown-ups, you can't get very far in life without encountering your first failure. So if you can make failure your friend, if you can learn from your failures, eventually, longer term, you'll be better off. Invest in your team. Everything else is secondary. Easy point to make when you're out at sea with a team of people. But in your own lives, again, talking to grown-ups, your team, your family, your work colleagues, the people that you invest in every day, those are the ones that are important to you. Everything else is secondary. Determination, tenacity, and grit, nothing is won without it. We've had a lot of people apply to come with us because they needed that Instagram moment, or they wanted something to put on social media, but they weren't prepared to invest very heavily, put a lot of skin in the game. And when things got tough, those people folded very, very quickly. So if you're going to do something that's extraordinary, it's going to require sacrifice, it's going to require suffering through the tough times. So determination is really important. Honest, open, respectful communication was our lifeblood. And by that I mean, we had bad days. We had days when people didn't get on together, but we couldn't hide from it. We're on a boat that's 68 metres long. There's nowhere to hide unless you're really good at swimming. And so by able to have honest, open conversations with people, even under extreme stress, was in the end the way that opened up a lot of doors. We had a bar up on the top of the boat. It's called the Sky Bar. And many a times we would be sitting there, not on the days of celebration, because those days we were exhausted and we'd go to bed early, but on the days of failure where we needed people to talk openly and honestly about what had gone wrong. Our strength lay in our diversity. We had up to 46 people on board. We could take 49 at a push. I think we had 17 nationalities, a whole range of ages, and I think that was important. A lot of people talk about diversity because it's a politically correct thing to be. Actually, it's just common sense. It's a great business study that diversity gives you a stronger team. We certainly found that. If it's going to be something that people haven't done before, if you're breaking the trail on something that's new, it's going to be hard. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. So if you want to take on these things, and I encourage you to do so, just be prepared to put in that extra muscle. Visualize often and reflect regularly. By that I mean, if you're doing something that hasn't been done before, or if you're doing something that you haven't done before, a really useful tool for us was thinking about, what will this look like? What are we expecting it to look like? What will it sound like? What will it feel like? We're trying to map out what our realistic expectations are, so that on the day, if those expectations are tripped up negatively or positively, we can slow down and think about, where are we really going with this? And then reflecting regularly is like, even if it went well, where were the things that could have cracked first? What did we learn from the success of the day? What can we replicate on the next day? Observe, channel, manage, and master the energy. And I think, really, I know there's some young explorers here. I mean, I think that's a leadership responsibility, is that when things are going really well, then you need to pull the team back, because otherwise they get carried away with themselves and get ahead of their skis. And when things are really flat, then you need to pick them up. You're trying to hover around this medium level of productivity where things are not super good or super bad. You want to strike that nice tone in the middle. And if it doesn't break the law of physics, it's absolutely possible. And I left this one for last because for me it's the most important. For those that know me well, this has been my motto, I guess. It's also, when we started our company, we said, we've got to have some rules. Every company has rules. What's our rules? And I said, well, let's use this one. If it doesn't break a law of physics, it's absolutely possible. And by that, what I'm saying is that there are so many reasons not to do something. There's geopolitical complexities, financial complexities, there's technology gaps, there's so many reasons that you shouldn't do something. you might choose not to do something, that's fine. But if you want to do something and it doesn't break a law of physics, it's absolutely possible. And so back in that first conversation with Victor, when he said we're going to need to design a sub, right? It's like, yeah, what sub can we get? There aren't any. Oh, I guess we're dead in the water. Nope. Have another glass of wine, let's get a sketch pad and let's start working it out. As long as we don't breach the law of physics, it's absolutely possible. And sure enough, it was. Ship's still out there sailing. She's been sold to a science entity. They have 4 vessels. They do nothing but philanthropic science. They're going to spend $1 billion over the next 5 years just doing philanthropic science. So that little seed we planted is out there blooming most wonderfully. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rob McCallum from EYOS Expeditions. I'm the expedition leader aboard the DSSV pressure drop. Well, the technical title of what I do here is I'm the primary mission planner and I'm the expedition leader. So I plan all the missions for the vessel and its team while I'm ashore, and then when I'm on board I lead the expedition itself.
Hi, my name is Tim McDonald and I'm the sub-team leader Caladan Oceanic and one of 3 sub-pilots for the submersible limiting factor. So yeah, I started with this program about 3 years ago during the design and build of the sub. So for Rob and I to be able to end up in this submersible at the bottom of Challenger Deep takes a lot of dedication, it's months of planning, and it's also a huge honour, which is something that Rob and I definitely do not take for granted.
You know, I've been very fortunate to be part of the team on board for the last 3 years. You know, this is an incredible vehicle. It's the only one that's certified for unlimited dives to unlimited depth. So this vehicle is the pathfinder to the last frontier of exploration on Earth, the deep ocean. We're here at the Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench, the Western Pacific. This is the deepest part of the world's ocean. It's around 36,000 feet deep. And in all of human history, less than 24 people have dived here.
Is this the time I tell you I've been a lifelong claustrophobic?
You're ready to dive. No respect. Good luck.
Roger that, Zeno. We are pumping in. We'll see you when we get back.
Copy on that, LA.
Five meters off the bottom. Surface, LF, depth
1088 at bottom. Repeat, at bottom.
Greetings from the western pool of the Challenger Deep, deepest point in the Pacific Ocean.
Deepest point in the whole world, Rob.
That's true.
My name's Tim McDonald.
I'm Rob McCallum.
We're proudly the first Australian
And first Kiwi.
to get to the bottom of the ocean.
Well done, mate.
Well
That was
done.
great fun. That was great fun. This calls for a Vegemite sandwich.
And a cold beer. The hard-earned thirst deserves the best cold beer. Served best at the bottom of the ocean.
Good on you, mate.
Cheers,
well
Cobber.
done. What a
So the dive we just did to Challenger Deep was significant to me both personally and professionally. I just became the deepest diving Australian in history, but what was really special was to do it alongside Rob McCallum from New Zealand. Him and I have been so intertwined in this program for the last 3 years, and we've dedicated so much to it. So to be able to do that dive together was just absolutely amazing.
I mean, I was tremendously excited to go down. You know, I've been diving all of my adult life in scuba gear and in submersibles. I've been privileged to visit the Titanic at 4,000 meters and another kind of sub. But to have this submersible here, which is capable of unlimited depth in any ocean, was a real privilege. And you're in this alien world where everything you see is for the first time. I mean, for a commercial or a professional expedition leader, life just doesn't get any better than that. It's a culmination of a dream.